Curio friends, before we begin our art project today, we're going to take a few minutes to discuss Victorian architecture. Architecture is how a house is designed and created, or a building, or even a yard, or different spaces. So architecture is the idea of how space is designed. And today we're going to learn a little bit about Victorian style homes and how sometimes those homes can be even turned into haunted houses in movies. If you take a look at these two houses, these would both be examples of Victorian architecture. If you'd like to, now would be a great time to pause the video and talk about some things that you notice that are the same between the two buildings. Some things that you might notice that are the same is that they're both very tall. Some people live in homes that are very short and flat, a ranch style home where there's no stairs to go up to another level. These houses are also decorated very beautifully. There's all different kinds of small details that help to make these houses look really fancy that a lot of houses don't have on them today while they're being created. This kind of architecture with all of these kind of fancy extras and where the house is very tall is called Victorian architecture, and is actually named after Queen Victoria because she was very fancy. So these houses kind of mimicked her same style. Do you happen to know if there's a Victorian style house near you? These would also be two examples of Victorian style homes. So even though their architecture is similar, they're large, there's many different stories, or there's a height to them. There's a lot of different steps and different levels, and they're very decorated and beautiful. They can still look a little bit different. Some have pointed roofs, some are a little bit more flat, but they all still have kind of a similar idea that unites them all together. I always love to talk about Victorian architecture near Halloween, because for those of us that do celebrate Halloween, Victorian homes are normally the houses that turn into haunted houses or old, broken down, run down, kind of creepy houses in different Halloween shows, movies, or even books. This image on the left is actually a very famous haunted house from the Addams Family, which was a show and also a movie. So today, as we work on our architecture and our drawing, you can choose between creating a house that's haunted or a beautiful Victorian style home that's highly decorated and very fancy. And I'm going to show you how to do this step by step. And of course, you can add your own details and interpretation as we go on. What you'll need for today's project is a piece of paper, a pencil, and an eraser. And as we keep going, you might want the opportunity to outline your project with Sharpies, or you could also use a black crayon. I'm using a white piece of paper. If you don't have white at home, you can use any other kind of color. You can also use lined paper if that's all you have too. So any kind of paper will do. When you're drawing with your pencil, try to keep it light. I'm going to draw a little bit darker, but you want to keep it a little bit lighter, so if you make a mistake, you can erase it. We're going to start by building our house for our Victorian style architecture drawing to kind of start with these little shapes that build and make our bigger house. Sometimes you've seen, especially little kids, draw houses like this where they start with one square or rectangle and they put their roof on and that's it. So today we're going to start with some squares, but that's not going to be our whole house. That's only going to be one room in our many-roomed Victorian style home. And later on you could choose to either have it really decorative and fancy, or I'll show you some different ways to make it look broken down, to make it look like it's a little bit haunted or run down. Right now we're going to start and we're going to do the same thing all together. And then as we get our basic shapes put down, you'll have the chance to be creative and run wild with it. So we're gonna start by finding the middle of our paper. We're gonna shift down towards the bottom, but not at the very, very bottom of the paper. We're gonna go a little bit up. So the middle, but slide it down a little bit near the bottom. I'm going to start by making kind of a square or rectangle shape. And I would like you to try to make it a little bit more around this size. See, if we make our square this big, well, then we don't really have room to add doors and windows. If we make our square or rectangle this big, then we don't even have any room for roofs and really cool stuff we can add later. So we're going more with a kind of medium style square. And this is going to be our first room, and I'm actually going to put a roof on my first room. And you could choose to do a triangle for a roof. I'm going to do a really fun shape called a trapezoid. A trapezoid looks a little bit more like this. It has two lines that are parallel, they're even, and then it kind of has these little kind of almost triangle shapes that cruise down over top of it. You could do a triangle for your roof. You do not have to follow my trapezoid example, but that's what I like to do. So that's what I'm going to work on next. I already have one of my nice parallel lines. So I'm going to do another one on top. I'm going to try and leave them nice and even in the middle. And then I'm going to bring this down and make a little bit more of a triangle shape. The nice thing about a video is if I go too fast for you, you can pause it until you're caught up. Or if you don't quite understand what I'm saying, you could always rewind it and watch it again. So feel free to pause, rewind, or fast forward as you need it. So now that I have my first room done, I'm gonna add some more rooms to my house because we talked about how Victorian homes have lots of rooms and they're really tall. So one main thing is that you have to make sure your room is connected to the rest of the rooms. You don't want a room that's falling off the rest of the house. So I'm going to make this square or rectangle a little shorter, but I want to make sure that it comes down to the same level as the rest of my other rectangles I'm going to draw, because you want your house to be built nice and even. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. If you're a good guesser, you might have already guessed that. And you could put the same roofs on if you want to, or you could put triangle roofs on. I'm going to do the same kind of roof, but this time I won't see one side of it because it'll be attached to the house. So here's how this would look. I would bring my line out and down like this. Or if I wanted to, I could add a triangle roof to my house, and I would just stop when I got to the rest of my roof so that it looks like this is in front and that's behind. So this is my first level, and we're gonna stack our house even taller. So we're gonna start off by doing another rectangle, and if you're still working on your roofs, you can pause it. I'm going to add, I love this trapezoid roof, so I'm gonna add my trapezoid roof again. And then we still want many more rooms in our Victorian home. So we're gonna add more side rooms like we did before. And this time, not only does your side room need to connect to here, but it also needs to connect down here. If you live in a house and you go upstairs to get to your bedroom, you don't want a big giant gaping hole where your stairs don't connect to the top of the house. So you wanna make sure that all of your rooms are connected together. Even if you have the triangle roof, you're gonna bring this straight down. And again, you could do whatever kind of roof you want to. You could do the trapezoid roof, or this time I'm gonna switch it up to a triangle roof, but I'm gonna make it a little fancy. I'm gonna add a little curve in here just to fancy it up a little bit. And I'm gonna do that on both sides so that they're the same on both sides. If you want to, you have room up here, you could add another room or you could keep it empty. Some of the Victorian style homes have these little bars at the top that almost looks like you would be able to go onto the roof and it would be like an area where you could hang out. I like to make these little arrows. And you don't have to do this, but you could if you want to. So that's how I make it look like it's kind of a fence. But I do like to add an extra room up here, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make one more room. And I'm going to do kind of a shorter, wider triangle roof, like that. So that's your basic part of your home. Right now though, your home's kind of floating on the page. So what we want to do is we want to take our pencil and we want to make some lines that come right off the side of your house so that it now looks like your house is sitting on the ground. It's not just randomly floating anymore, because that would be concerning. So it's nice and flat. So what we continue to do is we can start to add some different kinds of features to our homes. We could add windows, we could add doors, we could start to add different shingles to our house, which is cool. But actually, before I do any of that, I am going to trace and outline my project with a Sharpie, because I want you to be able to see it really nicely, especially when I color it in. Sometimes when I color, it's hard to be able to see these different lines that I drew. So if I outline it with black, then I'm able to still see those lines, which is nice. If you've never used a Sharpie before, you want to start at the top and pull down towards you. Sometimes people do the opposite and they'll start at the bottom and push up, and that makes it a little harder to have control over it. But if you start at the top and pull down, it gives you a little bit more of a smooth, swooping line. So this could be something you could choose to do. You don't have to. I really like doing it a lot because I like how it makes everything stand out. So you could either pause it while you're outlining also, or you could fast forward it if you're choosing not to do that. We're gonna work on some of this, and then we're gonna save some of it for the next part also. So we're gonna get our basic structure done today. And then we'll talk about the differences between haunted and very fancy house. And it doesn't need to be haunted, it could just look run down. Really take your time when you're outlining. I have done this a lot, so I feel like I'm pretty good at it, pretty quick. One thing I like to do sometimes is change to a different Sharpie. This one's really teeny tiny for little teeny tiny areas. So it's nice because I can get those little skinnier pieces outlined too. It's really tiny. So it would be something you could absolutely do with your family's permission. If you wanted to research Victorian architecture and you wanted to look at different ideas, you are more than welcome to do that to help you with different ways that you'd like to go about it. Because the next step is for us to start to add some windows and doors. And there are so many different things you could do with that. You could have a door that's square, rectangle, you could have double doors where they both open. You could have a door that's more of an arched shape. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do an arched door. And I'm not even gonna decide if I wanna give it a doorknob yet. I'm just gonna wait. You could do many different styles of windows. I'm going to do 2 really long rectangle windows down here. And we'll talk in a little bit about some of you might wanna put kind of the crossbars in between them. But we have some different options too, depending on if you want it to be fancy or if you want it to be a little bit more rundown looking. You also have the option of doing a window like this, where it's arched, or I could make those smaller, and I could even have 2 that are arched that are smaller on one side. I'm going to make a really nice big window here, and I'm gonna do more windows up here. I haven't really done any smaller square ones yet. And you can be really creative. I've been in houses before where somebody has a round circle window, and that's something that you can do also. So feel free to be creative with how many windows you want, where you want them, and how big and small you are. The bigger you make your window, the easier it is to draw something inside. So that's something to keep in mind also, depending on what you want to show inside your window. Our next part that we're gonna work on is adding some shingles to our project. So when we're working on some shingles, you'll have to decide what kind of home you're looking to do. Because if you want it to be very fancy, then your house is probably well taken care of. For shingles, I like to do lines that look kind of like U's connected together, almost like mermaid scales or dragon scales. So what I do is I draw them as big as I can, because drawing them bigger is way easier. And if you want to draw this with pencil first, you can, or you can do it just with Sharpie. It's completely up to you. So I'm going to do these really large U shapes, and then I'm going to continue those until I can't really fit them anymore. And if your home is a beautiful Victorian style home, then you would do something like this, where there are no holes in your roofing. If you do want your house to look a little bit more run down, then there's a special way to make it look like there's a hole in your roof, and we can talk about that. You don't have to do your roof this way. You could do your roof like this, and it could have lines across it, or you could do them differently. If you want these that are trapezoids to have a different shingle to your roof, and these ones that are pointed to have something different, you can do that too. It's totally up to you. If I was trying to make my house look a little bit more run down, then I would actually want to draw this kind of blob looking shape to show some holes or some breakage in my roofing. I'm gonna do another one up here. This is gonna be real mangled, lots of holes. This one has a hole coming in right here. So what you would do next, as you're kind of working on your roofs, you would leave this hole empty, and anywhere that you put your roof, you would not draw into it. So it would make it look like it was busted and had a hole through it. You might still, even on a haunted house or a rundown house, you might have some areas of your roof that still are all intact, and that's fine. But broken areas, no matter what kind of shingles you're doing, you want to stop when you get to your shingle and continue on the other side of it. So I would stop and continue on the other side. And I'm just making them as U shape as I can. And I can even do U's up here. And honestly, the bigger you can draw them, the better, because then you don't have to draw as many, because you could be there for a very long time drawing lots of U's. And I actually like to draw it with my Sharpie, that way I don't have to trace back over it. Even with this guy, I would try to make it look like he had these shingles that were broken through. So that would be the difference between making really nice decorated roofing and kind of broken, busted roofing. And you could always do different things. Like I said, you don't have to do the U-shaped shingles. You could do lines that go straight across, but it would just, in these areas that are broken, not have anything in it. And you might even want to make it extra fancy by adding something like maybe circles inside of these, just to make it look extra fancy. But you don't have to. Hopefully your creativity is really starting to run wild. You could even add different things to the tops, like weather vanes, lightning rods, and we'll get there a little bit more as we keep going. So for today, what you should have done is your basic shapes, your roofs, a door, and you should also have some windows. Work on your shingles, and then whenever we come back next time, we'll talk about adding some details to make it look really beautiful or to make it look run down, and we'll compare and contrast the differences between those and how we can add those different things to make your project look one way or the other. You're absolutely more welcome to go on to some internet sites and check out different Victorian style homes to get some ideas for when we continue working on these next time.